like to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon and taking control of your construction with Sage CRE. On behalf of One Vision, we're really excited to have you be a part of this session. My name is Craig Decker. I'll be walking you through this today. We will have, you can put Q&A questions during the course of this webinar, and we will address those after it's over. We will send you out questions and correspond with you that way. Today, we will be recording this, and for some reason, if someone on your team is not able to make it, you can forward the recording on to them. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for taking the time to work with us today and be a part of this webinar that we have. We're excited about this topic. This has been a huge request on behalf of the construction companies that we work with. There's so much going on in the construction world today, and especially being able to work through what we have. And so one of the things that we want to make sure that we do today is cover things that we're hearing from the technology requirements of construction firms. They're trying to keep up with the huge demand of construction at the same time, utilizing technology that may not be up to date. And so we want to talk about the things that we're seeing with our construction clients, in addition to companies that we're beginning to work with to help them through that. So a little bit about One Vision. We've been a project solutions provider since 1997. We work with companies all across the U.S., multiple over 43 states, and have a expertise in project management, project accounting, project controls, and we'll talk about each of those components as we cover that today. Some of the things that we're going to cover, we can cover some of the technology that we're utilizing that construction companies are using today to really give them an edge. One Vision itself has worked with many products over the years, and the reason we chose Intact, we'll kind of walk through that and specifically talk through the history of Sage. Sage acquired Intact back in 2017, so it's been a few years, and now they're moving their deep history of construction on into that. And then also we'll talk about what is best in class approach. And then finally, what everybody really wants to see is really diving into the demo of the solution, kind of walk you through that. So what we do is we help construction companies really figure out what they're doing in a way that makes sense. We call it the company One Vision, but it's really built on the fact that that vision we give you is what's going on within your organization. And so within the organization, we have the ability to figure out what's happening and how we're walking through that. And so what that gives us the ability to do is give them tools that when I'm where I need to be, whether it's in the field, in the office, in a project management meeting, in a team meeting, in a group meeting, I have that information and can deliver that. We've worked with groups, one group specifically saved over 15 hours a month just on reporting. And the reason is they're so used to using Excel to manage that functionality that now we're allowing them to get that data in real time in dashboard formats, which we'll look at here in just a second. Additionally, another company that we did that moves so much of, a lot of the times we're working with construction companies that they do so much compiling on the bookkeeping side, they really don't have time to analyze what's going on. In this case, they've been able to move some people out of just bookkeeping, rekeying data, whether it's invoicing or those types of things, and moving them on out to strategic projects that they needed for the organization. So we're seeing construction company realize in order to have that edge with as much work as is going on, backlogs are high, how do we manage it where we're not having to duplicate entry, do a lot of manual entry, and change that. And then another group that we work with really freed up time outside of accounting because of the reporting that they get, and they can actually see them drop a couple of points to the bottom line by more efficiently using data than the competition. So these are the things that we kind of help people do. So one of the things that all these companies have in common, when we began to work with them, I would say the majority of them were using disparate systems. They have a system for managing this part of the business. They have a different system, sometimes Excel, to help with billing and reporting and other things that they need to do. And we were able to help them move by using Sage Intact. And so they're successful because we were able to take the construction history that Sage has, that we'll talk about in just a second, and then use the new cloud-based multi-tenant technology of Intact. So one of the things that we see, the trends that we see out there is people have to have actionable data. They have to have the ability to know where that project is. If I'm in the field, I need it in the field. If I'm in the office, I need it in the office. But I need dashboard, we call it dashboard driven decision making, the ability to see that data in real time and act then on that data. And especially as costs are rising, and obviously in the lump sum fixed fee world of construction, it's important to know exactly where we're at with our prices at any given time on time. And so, as that, companies are realizing we've got to do more work with fewer resources. And a lot of times that's because we've got to have that technology competitive edge to help us manage that. So we're seeing that a lot. The other thing that we're seeing is, visibility to what's going on, but on the financial health of each project, or having to do so much work in Excel, it's eating up time that we don't have. We need to know where we stand in real time and be able to adjust that. So those are one of the things that we're trying to get to and manage as part of what we're changing and how we're changing it. At the end of the day, the system really becomes a system for not only project tracking and reporting, but managing subs, doing consolidation across multiple entities, the do froms that are managing in there, making sure our accounting compliance is up to date, and then really driving profitability and cash flow. We've got to see us drive points to the bottom line, both at the project level and the company level, to help us manage what's going on. So where Intact came from was that Sage history. We talked about, why did Sage get into the Intact world? And what they saw was a true multi-tenant cloud. They have a long history of Timberline and then Sage 300, which obviously, Timberline became Sage 300 for the construction and real estate. They had the Sage 100 contractor. So that deep expertise. And when Sage acquired Intact, they realized that you have Sage Intact, which is the clear leader in cloud accounting and project management accounting. And so why not combine that history? So they begin to build what we call Sage Intact Construction into the product. So it's actually a SKU that you buy. It's called CRE. And when you add that in, it gets that expertise and the depth of functionality that we had from Sage 300, but moves it into the multi-tenant cloud, which is true 4 updates a year on Intact, and the dimensional capabilities of reporting. So the way they did this is Sage Intact had obviously been around, and so when you buy the core module, you get the general ledger and the receivables, payables, procurement, order entry, that type of stuff. But then you can add inventory, you can add revenue management, help with project resource management. Then you add what we call construction. And so with the construction piece of it, what we're doing then is we've added cost types, we've added cost codes, the project estimates, we've added project costing and billing, the ability to do retainage, and both on the billing side, but also on subcontractors, and having that compliance on the vendor management. And then what they're rolling out is this is kind of where the best of breed will come into play. All of this gets served up via financial reports, dashboards that we have in Intact, and even what we call interactive custom report writer. If you think about doing pivot tables in Excel, but doing it directly out of the Intact system, that's a good use of how that works. And then they've also built relationships on what I call project controls. We're really getting into change management, task management, things like that we get into. And so they're continuing to take that rich history of Sage 300 and build it into Sage Intact, so that what you end up with is truly a modern cloud, financial management solution. It manages projects, it manages the overall business. It's dashboards, custom report and dashboards, that we call it dashboard driven decision making, getting the right person to the right role so that we can manage that. And so what happens then is we have the ability to constantly streamline processes across all your projects in the organization. You can even have them by different types of projects, see margins by different projects, and even get into planning and budgeting as part of the overall financial solution. So we'll get into this more in the solution itself, but the real key is to give you insight through dynamic dashboard, or what we call dashboard driven decision making. So depending on the role, if I'm an operations manager, I might look at something different than a controller of the business, or I might look at something different than the operations manager, the CFO. So each role will serve up data differently depending on the role that you're in. And what allows to happen is that when you're talking about consolidations or intercompany projects or intercompany entities that need to work together, it allows that where you're constantly giving real-time data. So the end of the close, it's always been such a big deal in accounting, but you're beginning to get to where you should really be doing that in real time. And so construction companies that are going to compete today, we don't have the long lag times like what we've had. We have to be able to streamline projects across all the different processes that we use for all the different projects and all the different entities, so that we end up having, you know, that functionality that happens. So what we get into is, you know, what are construction companies going to do for the future? Are they going to be more agile? Are they going to be able to move more quickly? Are they going to be able to see projects in real time? Are they going to be able to make decisions in real time with dashboards that help them have the data at their fingertips? And then again, free up resources like we talked about earlier, being able to move people that had been managing manual accounting to actually getting into analyzing data and analyzing projects that make sense. And that's really what we want to do. So, you know, what we try to do is basically create customers for life. So we've tried to provide a system that made sense. And when we chose Intact, we saw that once Sage bought them and it became Sage Intact, we realized that we take what we thought back in 2013 when we started working with Intact. Now we're getting to see the fact that not only do outside people that evaluate the tool, from the AICPA to the G2 crowd, which is G2 crowd is based on companies that actually use the product and do they recommend it, are recommending it. You know, with the AICPA, it's the only, you know, preferred, the Sage Intact's the preferred provider by the AICPA. And so that's exciting for the people that wrote the book on accounting, but then to have that rich history of Sage 300, which was obviously the, you know, following Timberline, you know, to take all that knowledge and be able to roll that into somebody that has led the market since 2015 and in the net promoter score, and also the compared to other companies for the 5th year in a row, you know, really giving us that data. So what we're trying to do when we talk about this is that Intact's approach is really built off being best in class. We're going to be the best at managing your projects, managing your business, managing your financials. We're going to allow you flexibility around project controls and some field operations that you may want to do. There's things that you could do within Intact. There's, you know, for example, you could use time and expense from Intact, or you may already be using a solution that makes sense. Well, what Intact says is we're giving you the best in class choice. So you don't have to use everything that we have to manage that. And so that's what comes into play with that. You can do the estimating straight out of Intact, or you may already use a tool that you like, and we're going to bring that into the table and work with Intact for that. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and jump into the demo and kind of walk through some key things that we see that construction companies are wanting to do. So the first thing we're going to do as we see this is really being able to, let's go here. What you'll be able to see here is the ability to see a dashboard based on a role. And so what that role allows us to do is to focus on the individual that needs the data. And so the way that we do that, the elements that we're using for construction companies that seem to make a difference for them, is that we're making these dashboards by role based on 3 major components. Number 1 are performance cards. So these are key performance indicators, or things that you may want to know right at the, you know, the tip of your tongue, or be able to see it right on a dashboard that help you make a decision. I can easily see here that I've got 16 jobs, and I can see that I've got 16 active jobs here. If I want to, you know, break it down by location, I can, or if I want to change the date, I can do that. And it becomes interactive, these performance cards. So performance cards are key things that we want somebody in a role to see. Then we assign them to that role. It allows them to do that. The second part of dashboards are reports. You see reports here, and the ability to, you know, drill into the actual costs that make up this project and see these and literally drill back to the source transaction where that created. That's part of what we have with the dashboard driven decision making. So after performance cards, we go to these reports. Other reports, this is what I was talking about with ICRW. Here we've got our WIP report, we're driving our over and under billings. So many companies, when we first begin to meet with them, are managing their WIP report in Excel, and we move them away from that and move them into driving it based on the activity. So when we talk about dashboard driven decision making, we're really talking about tools that allow us to, when a transaction happens, a new procurement item, a purchase order, a subcontract gets received, and it now moves from being a commitment to a cost, actually driving the true WIP as it's happening, as billings going out the door, as we see our cost estimates come in. If we see a estimate of completion or a forecast come in, we have the ability to update this WIP report, or this WIP report to be updated automatically without someone having to go out to Excel and manually manipulate it, which again wastes time that is not valuable in helping to see how the decisions are being made. And then finally, you see down here charts. So that's the third component. So you have key performance indicators, or what we call performance cards. You've got charts, and you got reports. And so those make that up. So once you understand those components and how we manage those components, what we begin to get into is making sure that we can roll that out for the right person. So while this is a project performance report, to give somebody based on projects, notice that when I'm looking at all this, I could actually go change based on these dimensions. So I could literally go say, I just want to see it based on one, entity. So now all of a sudden I'm just drilling into this particular company and see that automatically this is changing based on either the date, or in this case, where I change what location I'm dealing with, all of a sudden we're changing the data and how it works. And so you see that this data is interactive based on what data that I interactively chose with this dashboard. So that makes for meetings that you can go into that have dashboard driven elements that help us monitor and manage what we want to see. And so those are the things that we manage, as far as based on the different components. By changing the component, I could even go down to an individual project or a type of projects, or even say a project manager, a particular project manager that within that. So those are the things that we can begin to manage. And I can see that, oh, he's managing these, in this case, B. Jones is managing, 5 of these, 6 of these projects, and be able to manage that, 7 of them that we're managing. Notice that count drives. So all of a sudden that gives us the ability to do what we call dashboard driven decision making. The next dashboard we're going to look at is really a project management one where we're looking at the fact that, again, we've got our WIP report, but maybe it's more in driving a particular project. So what we've got set up here is the ability here to go look at our, in this case, I can pull a particular job. And when I, pull that particular job, then all of a sudden my cost codes are being driven down here. So I can see labor costs, subcontract materials, other overhead items, see those costs today, see what our cost of completion is, and how much do I have to spend. So in this case, I have, cost to complete or cost of date of 146,000, but I had a forecast of cost of completion of 96,000. So I'm over 50,000. I know that. Where am I going to make that up and be able to interactively use filtering and dashboards and things like that to interact with these? Additionally, we can go into items like this where we may want to see, POs that are not invoiced. So maybe give me the data based on, what we originally ordered, what the revised order amount, and what the total build is, so that we can see what our open commitments are by job, and the ability, again, use the drill down to get into different data that you'd want to get into. So again, different role within the organization when I'm managing, maybe not at a location level like what we were doing here. And here I'm driving down into either my projects as a project manager, or specifically within an individual project, and really wanting to see data to know how much do I have left to spend based on different areas that we have in here. So all of this is made up of the job. So what happens in Intact when we have a job, and the job can come from multiple places. We have people that will roll us in from CRM as an opportunity close. For example, maybe Salesforce, and we may want to set up the job from Salesforce. We may just go ahead and set it up the minute we know that it's an opportunity. But this job has characteristics about it. Number one, what's the job type? And so that gives us information related to how these jobs are being managed. The statuses matter. I may have this so that while we're waiting a PO, maybe it's in the system, maybe it starts to drive our backlog, but nothing can happen against it. Maybe it's on hold or unstarted. So those statuses can mean something both in the way that we report. So for example, when you look at a job status here, that may be something that we want to drive on how we set up jobs, that maybe we want to look at all the jobs that are unstarted. So this data matters, and in our whole system, dashboard driven decision making is driven off the fact that these fields matter and they drive what we're looking at. So you can see our customer, we can see whether it's a parent-child job. We've got transaction rules, we've got business rules that associate, so that each job could operate differently depending on the workflow that gets set up, depending on the transaction rules that get set up, and whatever these set up here for whether everybody can enter time to it, or whether only users assigned to the job or the job in the cost code would be allowed to capture time against it. Additional information is real powerful because on one hand, we want to know, maybe we're updating our schedule. We want the schedule to update whether we're, 30%, 40%, 50% complete. And for some of our clients, what we'll do is we will have observe percent complete right next to cost percent complete, right next to bill percent complete, to give us an overall financial health of the organization. So that's something that we're able to get into and see that data in a way that makes sense. The other things that come into play are these dimensions that we drive, not only from a billing, how we set it up, that it's a fixed fee or lump sum job, whether we bill expenses or AP and PO, or whether that's all part of the lump sum job, but also these dimensions. When I go in here and I set this dimension up, or I come in here and I set a class up, I have the ability to set those so that if I want to track that, every time this is hit, it's driving that department or that class, if that's something you choose to use. And in one company, we can have that. In one company, you may not want it. Tracks other sales orders and PO numbers in here. This gives us power around whatever our markups are. So for example, we could do, if it's a fixed fee plus, markup, or cost plus, some markup, we have the ability to have bill rates. So we can handle T&M not to exceed, we can handle lump sum, fixed fee, cost plus. Those types of jobs get here. And this is really the power that comes in and starts to say, based on different employees or types that we come in here, we can have different markups based on different things that we see. So this is the way that we create our rules, that this job follows differently than what another job would do. And so what people are finding is, in the new world of construction, the ability to go set this up and then forget about it, right? We set it up and then let the rules drive where this goes to help with our decision making when we're looking at job projects and costs and margins and things like that as they're walking through. The next thing that you can do is some job summary information, just to give you on this particular job. Most people don't use this as much anymore. It's valuable to see, but more importantly, most of that's already driven out to the job and given us that information. Invoicing, do we want to, if we go over what we budgeted, do we want to issue a warning or prevent the billing? Do we want to exclude expenses? So a lump sum that includes expenses, let's say, is 100,000 plus expenses. If we're at 95,000 and we're going to bill 10,000, but 8 of that is expenses, then we're okay if we exclude expenses on that item. Then really the construction piece comes in. So here's where we have our cost codes, and these cost codes are set up so that we can bring in regular CSI codes. With these, you can already have them set up based on what we call standard cost codes, so you can see what cost types are already associated with it. So in this one, I can see I got labor burden, and some other types of labor. I could have materials, I could have. So when you get into here and you look at the different things, these are the different cost types that you could have: materials, other, subcontract. You set these up and how they end up getting coded. But what happens is then those cost codes can be on that particular, those cost types can be on that particular cost codes. We can also track production units. This is a big deal for productivity. So we do a lot with clients on productivity units so that they can track how their productivity is working. They can track the uses of that versus the original plan to see how we're performing. And so that you can manage all of those from a units of production. You've got dates too, so you can show where you were based on certain dates. I'd say that's one of the underused features that people don't always understand and take advantage of it. It's a real handy feature within the construction world of Sage that they're able to handle pretty well. And then finally, our estimates. So when we get into our estimates, this is driving our cost estimate, so that we have the ability to come in here and we can load these cost estimates based on cost code, cost type, amounts, units of production, quantities, things like that we may want to take advantage of, and load that data. and then have the ability to manage that. There's a whole workflow built in as to whether it's a, original, is this a change order, is this a forecast, change, how do we manage that? And the flow would determine different things. You can have different types here. So for example, we've got change orders, forecasts, originals, and those can do different steps depending on what we have setting up. As far as job information goes, this is just keeping information related to the job. More importantly, what's our, are we going to go to a change order? Are we going to go to a regular budget? Is it going to be based on the period of the estimate of each effective date of each line item, or the effective date of this estimate? Or are we going to drive this when the job began? And so you can drive those job estimates and really control a lot of the functionality around that. So this is the heart. This is what helps drive all of these dashboard-driven decision-making, so that once you set up a job, whatever state it is, then costs start coming in from all the different areas to help drive that data moving forward. And so that's really the key to understanding what's going on with that. Next thing you kind of get into is retainage. So both on AP and AR, obviously construction companies having retainage is a big deal. So that, for example, I can see that, in this case, the last column out here is retainage. So in this case, I've got a $108,000 invoice, 12,000 retainage. You can bill that retainage as it's time, so that it can be set up when you set up the job and the particular schedule values. And so you can have that retainage drive that. Again, you can drive down into those documents themselves, go see what they were, see what they have set up here. I can see I've got 10% retainage on this. And so it's retained $12,000 in this case. So you can see that from the AR. You can do the same thing on the AP side for your subcontractors, so that you can have retainage on that, and then bill that retainage when you're ready. Final two things I want to cover specifically from the construction side of what's going on. I know that we've covered a lot. There's a lot here that firms are taking advantage of. But here, when we roll out our schedule of values, one of the things that we have is we've got all our line items here, and we can basically see that this is a $79,000 item. The key is being able to see the fact that originally we started with $55,000 as the original amount, and then I could have pending changes. In this case, all the changes are posted and approved, and those posted change orders are all of these totaling $24,000. So that we can see our revised, contract amount of $79,000. You can even go back and see where all those transactions were posted and the history of all the documents and what happened as they went through. So you kind of manage all of that right here from this contract with the schedule of values. On the same side, you have the same thing on the subcontract side from the purchasing side. So that what you have on the subcontractors is that I can again go look and see that this was originally $1,000 original subcontract. We did a $600 approved change order down here. So we have a revised contract amount of $1,600. Again, have the same capability of drilling into the details, or actually going to look at the history of how all those were created. So we manage all of that in the way that we manage, that particular scenario. So again, it's all driven off of when we set up that first rule here to go set up the job. The job follows the rules as transactions are hitting it. And so what it ends up doing is it allows us to have dashboards that the minute transactions are hitting, project managers are really managing in real time. And so as we think about the way that we're managing those components, it allows us to improve the information flow that we have. So, as the data is flowing, it's flowing because that's the workflow. But by the way, that also drives our reporting and our decision making that we work through. And so those are the things that really help us drive, how we're managing that. Again, obviously you can bill based on schedule values. You can bill based on percent complete. Again, we've mentioned you can do cost plus time material on some of your smaller jobs that might not be lump sum driven. But the biggest thing that we see is just this WIP report where it can be driven without having to go create it out in Excel. And then again, manage based on, I literally have the ability to change dynamically what's in here. And you can see that those subcontracts change based on what we have in here. And so this is the way that we begin to manage the organization. So construction wise, as we're managing that from the job and working through retainage and change orders and change management and managing that, what we end up getting into is the fact that all of that flows up for both the CFO. So from a construction perspective, I can see in real time while this one or this one was really driven to either the individual project manager or the ops manager managing, say, all the jobs in a particular region. This was operationally driven. This dashboard helps us understand how the CFO looks at it. How are we doing overall? What does our margin look like? What's our cash on hand? Drilling into that cash on hand. So it's a sum across all projects. Again, I can drill down into different locations. I can look at working capital. Those types of things are drilling because the dashboard for this person is operating differently than the person that's looking at this, or even dropping down to a controller level and focusing more on, okay, what's our actual AP? What's our actual AR? How are the individual profit and loss by department or division or dimension going, or even getting into departments. And if I were to look at the particular department and see how they're doing month over month, trend over trend, that really gets us to the key that we need to do. So again, dashboard driven decision making allows us to look at how salary and wages are driving down. In this case, we're driving costs down while our productivity's up. So those are the things that help us manage how we get through the system and how we look at this. So we've done this particular webinar again to focus on construction and really what people are seeing with the tools that Sage brought together for the history of what they had with Timberline and later Sage 300 and Sage 100 Contractor. We've taken that experience, brought it into the technology of Sage Intacct, and are now able to deliver dashboard driven decision making for your organization to help your construction company stay in real time. And this, what we're seeing that companies are coming to us, they're leaving Excel and all the different manual workarounds they have to do with Excel so that everybody can work within the system and drive that data in the way that makes sense for them. So what we're going to do, we're going to kind of close this down. If you have questions, you can go ahead and submit those. We'll follow up in the way that those come back to us. And one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is that if somebody in your organization didn't get to see this, we'll go ahead and send that out to them. And this will also be broken up into different components and sent out to everybody. So number one, I want to thank everybody for joining us today and having a look at what we're doing in the construction world. While we're seeing smaller companies and mid-sized companies really move quickly to Sage Intacct with the CRE functionality. And I just want to thank you for joining us today. Everybody have a great afternoon, and we appreciate you joining us. Thank you.